Hello and welcome to the Talking City podcast, the Manchester City podcast from the Manchester Evening News. It's a week on since Manchester City completed the treble. A week yesterday they were getting drenched in the centre of Manchester at the treble parade, but we're still here to talk about everything that's gone on. We've heard from the chairman this week, the players have been on international duty and there's been plenty of transfer stories to talk about. My name's Joe Bray and joining me to discuss all of that, first of all, is Simon Bajkowski. Si, how are you doing?
Yes, very well, very well. I've not had any time to eat today, so I might disgrace myself on our YouTube channel. But other than that, I'm okay.
Fair enough. We've seen worse, I'm sure. Tyrone, Marshall, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I'm good. I have eaten, but if I see Si tucking into a bacon sandwich halfway through this, then my stomach is definitely going to be rumbling.
Yeah, well, if you see my coffee, that's my contribution to the food and drink chat today. Let's get started. We've heard from the chairman this week, his annual interview with City Media. It's always good to hear from the very top. Obviously, it's an interview with City, but he's been very honest. He's been very on the front foot. Simon, can you sum up sort of the mood that he had? What's he said? What's caught your eye?
Positive and relaxed. I think it's probably the most relaxed he's been in all of these end of season addresses. Usually there is kind of some thing that he wants to get off his chest, whereas it was kind of notable this time that, you know, the big elephant in the room, the Premier League charges and City's kind of frustration at those. He kind of strayed away from picking a fight with the Premier League or anything like that. He just said, I'll talk after all the legal stuff's done. Hinted that he had very strong views, but didn't actually air any of them. So, you know, it was the interview that you might expect a man whose club have just won the treble to give. It was very, you know, happy about what they've achieved and very forward-facing about the achievements that they still want to achieve. I think, you know, it's hard to look beyond Istanbul as kind of a crowning moment and, you know, the completion of kind of many things that were on the list to do. But I think the message from the chairman's interview is that, you know, that they're not bored of winning. They won't be going away anytime soon. They want to carry on and look ahead to the next 15 years of ownership. So you know, if they have anything to do with it, then the future will be blue again.
Yeah, I think that was the overriding message, wasn't it? It wasn't just let's carry on winning for City. It was academy, women's team, the rest of the City football group, and that just shows the determination throughout the club. Tyrone, can we read anything into his answer on the Premier League charges? He has sort of given it a straight bat and said, I can't say anything, I'm annoyed. But then he did go on and say it's a bit of a shame that people sort of judge before they read the facts, and he listed a lot of facts of net spend. He was talking about that sort of thing. Did you get that impression that there is a frustration of those charges overshadowing these achievements this season?
Yeah, absolutely, and you know, I think he said he had very blunt views and very strong views on the charges, and you know, it's pretty obvious which way they're going to fall. So it will be interesting to hear what those blunt views are when the time comes to talk. But I think it's a good point he makes, and I think it's one a lot of City fans have made, that the elephant in the room is the charges, but that shouldn't distract from what a phenomenal football team this is, and what a phenomenal football team that's been built. And a lot of the charges relate to when City didn't have the revenues they had now at the very sort of start of this era, and maybe that's contributed to getting to this position. But the fact is, their record in the transfer market now is absolutely phenomenal. I was having this discussion before Istanbul, and I think you've probably got to go back to Benjamin Mendy for the last player they signed for any kind of decent fee who didn't improve or have an impact on this team and was a failure. And obviously that was partly injury related and then partly his own fault. So generally their record when they spend decent money is very good. Maybe Calvin Phillips will fall into that bracket of not quite making the grade. That's entirely possible, but pretty much the record is spot on, that they sign good players and Guardiola makes them great. His ability to improve players is phenomenal. His ability to come up with new ways of playing and move this team on constantly. And what we've seen with John Stones this season is incredible. So whatever your views on the Chargers, and even for those opposition fans and people who have an issue over the Chargers and will relate the treble to the Chargers, should be able to divorce themselves from it and say this is also a phenomenal team with probably the best manager there has ever been, doing incredible things. And I think Khaldoon's right that certainly everyone connected to City is going to be frustrated that they've maybe not had the respect they quite deserve for the treble. I think a lot of it has. There has been a lot of commentary about how great this team are and things like that. But the Chargers are always loitering there in the background, and while they're unresolved, they are going to. It's hard to have an event like Istanbul and an end to the season like that without them being mentioned, because at the moment they are part of the narrative. That's just how it is, because they're unresolved. So you can understand why City want them resolved and want them quickly, so that when they're having, when they're winning the next treble, that they aren't part of the narrative, and they can maybe get the respect they deserve for that one.
Well, he said in an interview, one of his previous annual interviews, that he won't let City be a distraction for other clubs' bad investment. And you make a good point there with the number of signings that City have made. There's been a lot of 50, 60 million signings, but apart from that, you've got to then jump from 60 million to 100 million for Jack Grealish. And I think about 60 million of that was offset by incomings that year as well. So it's one of them. I agree with your point completely, that they've spent money, but they've spent it wisely, and they've not been spending the 70, 80, 90 million transfer fees that other clubs have, and they don't have the trophies and the success to show for it. So I think that was more telling than his answer on the Chargers, really, that he was basically saying, we are run sensibly when it comes to things like that. And one man in particular that signifies that is Erling Haaland, and Khaldoon disclosed a chat that he had with Haaland at the start, and Haaland said, "I will win you the Champions League, Mr. Chairman." He's done exactly that. We can compare the interview from one year to this year. Haaland had just signed last year, and now he's gone and scored 52 goals in 53 games. That mentality is just behind everything he's done, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it can come across as arrogance if you sort of don't know him, but also players at that level need that bit of arrogance to sort of keep them on tilt and on the edge. And nobody thought he was going to score 52 goals, but Haaland knew he was going to score goals, and he knew he was going to score goals that were going to contribute towards City winning the league and City winning the Champions League. And you think back to the 1-1 draw at Leipzig, and City not in the best of form in that round of 16. Leipzig at home, no gimme, and oh wait, Haaland turns up and scores 5. And then Bayern Munich, obviously important goals there. Didn't score against Real, still played okay. He was okay in the final. The team weren't good at all. So no one thought he'd score 52. No one thought he'd score one in his last 8, but he did enough to win them, to be part of the side that won them the Champions League. And you can't deny the sort of X factor that he's added to the team and the club this season.
Yeah, I think Haaland's got them to the position to win the treble, and then he's clearly run out of steam a little bit. I think for Norway this week he has to come off, which feels very against his character that we've seen over the last year. But he's got City on that position, and then De Bruyne, Gundogan, Rodri have stepped up and got them over the line. And I think that 1 in 8 at the end of the season is just reflective of a very long season, and I'm sure he will come back, and he won't want that to happen again next season. So I'm going to come back to you. We heard a lot from the chairman about kicking on, not making sure that this is a flash in the pan, and going again, making sure that they defend these titles, that they've got the Club World Cup, the Super Cup. They want to expand at City Football Group level. That just shows the mentality at City. It just goes straight to the top, doesn't it? They're not going to stay still on this achievement this season.
No, it does. I think the chairman himself has said before that kind of the worst thing they could do after winning the league, say, would be to be complacent. And it was kind of telling that even Guardiola sits down for his press conference in Istanbul after winning the Champions League and thanks his chairman and the board for not sacking him for not winning the Champions League earlier, because he says like how many clubs have ruined themselves trying to win this Champions League or not winning the Champions League. I'm not saying they've ruined themselves by any effect, but Bayern sacked Nagelsmann in March because they wanted to win the treble and they were kind of one Dortmund choke away from winning nothing. So it's very easy to sort of forget that stability can be the best thing at a football club. And Guardiola said the challenge now is not to fall away, and he also said, knowing me, I don't think it will happen. And that the board know that while Guardiola's in charge, that he won't allow them to fall away, and he will continue to push them forward. But he will also be pushed forward by the chairman and Chiki Begiristain and Ferran Soriano. That is a close-knit quad, shall we say, who have a really strong relationship, and that allows the football club to keep pushing forward as aggressively as it does.
Yeah, these things are always PR at the end of the day, aren't they? But to have the chairman speaking so sort of apparently honestly and openly and confidently is a very good PR move from City. And if you are a City fan, you're just going to be reassured that you're going to be challenging for titles season after season, especially with Guardiola. And Guardiola this week did joke that he wouldn't have won the Champions League if Lukaku could finish, but that backs up the point that you make, Si, because it is fine margins and you've just got to be there. The consistency is arguably more impressive than winning the titles. One sort of less shiny PR move, should we say a little bit, is the treble celebrations, mainly because a lot of the players very much enjoyed themselves, and we saw them on the stage in Manchester, and I was there and I couldn't really understand what they were saying about turkeys and all that sort of thing. Tyrone, should we be concerned that the players had such a good weekend?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it would be nice to be looped into their private jokes so we could get them. But no, beyond that, I think it was good to see in a way. Mm-hmm. It's quite refreshing. There's excuse me. I don't really feel like there's a drinking culture in football these days, and obviously that's a good thing. I'm not suggesting we want to bring that back, but it's so sort of you just don't really see it. Even when the celebrations, they tend to go on behind closed doors. You don't get the impression that these things happen anymore. You don't see it in public, mostly because it ends up in criticism. So, I thought it was quite nice and refreshing to see. At the end of the day, they're just normal people like us. They're just a bit better at football than us. So why should they be any different? And when you achieve something brilliant, that's what's going to happen. And I thought even the conversations over the last few games in the treble about drink have been quite open to see. There's so many players now who are teetotalers, which is, I'm not suggesting that's a bad thing. I'm not suggesting we should all be alkies, and obviously when you're in the heart of a season, teetotaling is probably helpful. But even after winning the Premier League, there was a lot of chat about how players are going to celebrate and drinking and stuff like that. And it was quite nice to see in a way that elite athletes can have a drink and enjoy themselves and still manage to get up and perform and do the job. So, I thought it was quite good, and we know there's a few in that City team that like a drink. One in particular, Jack Grealish, seems to enjoy himself. Edison, always seems to be at the forefront of these things when it comes to the booze being passed around. I was in the mix zone in Istanbul when John Stones was walking out, and a few of us were almost pleading with him for a chat, and he had a can of Heineken in his hand and said that was his first drink in 11 months. So, he's obviously a teetotaler during the season, and then was going to enjoy it. So after 11 months without a drink, I'm guessing he was on the floor on Sunday morning. But no, I think it's good to see. You've got to enjoy these moments in your life and celebrate. And the reality is a lot of us celebrate with drink. I tend to celebrate big moments with drink. I'm going to celebrate at the end of this podcast by cracking one open at lunchtime. So that's just the way we are, really. And I thought it was nice to see. And I know there was a little bit of stick maybe, but it's just colourful characters, and I think, especially with Grealish, I think that's why we all love him, really, because he is, he more than anyone is just one of us, isn't he? He just happens to have an incredible talent, but he's never lost that sort of rawness, that down to earth nature. You see it in his interviews. You know, he's the one we all want to speak to because he's colourful and he speaks from the heart. And in an area when so many players are, you know, they're media trained coming through academy, so every media training at 14, 15, 16, it feels like Grealish is a throwback in that he just says what he thinks, whether he's going to upset people, whether he probably shouldn't say it, he just doesn't care. And it's the same with his celebrations, and it just makes him, you know, a Jack the lad, I guess. You know, it's fitting he's called Jack because that's just what he is, and I think it helps everyone relate to him because if we won the treble, I'm pretty sure that's how I'd celebrate as well.
I think it was in Houston in the first pre-season game, and Grealish had a summer on the front pages where he was spending this amount on champagne in Las Vegas, and all the papers were you know really focusing on that. And someone asked him, you know, does it like how are you feeling? How was your summer? That sort of thing, trying to get a line out of him, and he just said, "You were more bothered than I was. I was just I was on my holiday and having a drink," and he just brushed it off and said it's not an issue. I think he said all season that he can go and have a drink and then play, and we've seen him play for England this week as well. And if that's his, if he can do that, I've got even more respect for him as an athlete, because if he can get
absolutely, yeah.
as in the state that he was on that stage, and it seems like by his own admission he didn't have any sleep, and then he can go and play football very, very well, then, you know, fair play to him. And it's refreshing as well, I think, that it's been more of a positive conversation about it, just saying, oh yeah, look at him, like it's not been as critical as it could have been, or it might have been in the past. But yeah, they've gone on international duty, these players, and a couple more games. Grealish has played a little bit. Calvin Phillips got a very, very easy first goal for England in their rout of North Macedonia. Simon, can we get a word for Rodri and Laporte, who won the Nations League with Spain? Rodri's just racking up those winners' medals these days, isn't he?
If you think I'm watching Spain in the Nations League final after the season, then
I can't say I've watched it either.
Not watched Spain, not watched England, not watched anything. Rubbish. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a good thing. I'm not sure the Nations League title is anywhere near as impressive as winning the FA Cup or the Premier League or the Champions League. You know, he's had a good season. So have a lot of City players. I'm not sure Rodri is going to be remembered for winning the Nations League at the end of the treble, as Julian Alvarez is going to be remembered for winning the World Cup as well as the treble, I would say.
That's a decent answer, considering that you didn't watch those games.
It's rubbish though, isn't it? Who wants international football now? And I'll, you know, watching England steamroller, you know, a pretty ineffective nation.
No shots against them in 2 games, England. It's not learning much, are you?
No, you're learning that you should be watching the cricket and nothing else.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Pointless international break, innit?
Well, we do have the cricket to watch after this, so let's speed up. Let's go to a break, and we will come back for just one more little review of the season after this short break. Hello there, welcome back to the Talking City podcast, and I wanted to sort of finish this season with a sort of a review that we've not done in the last couple of weeks, because we've been talking about the treble. It would be a very short conversation if we just say who is the player of the season, but I just thought we'd go around and ask for sort of standout moments. I'll throw a couple of categories at you and see if you've got any thoughts. I'm guessing when I ask you who the player of the season is, it will be the same name. Does anyone have a suggestion other than Erling Haaland?
Rodri?
Yeah, I gave Rodri and Haaland 10 out of 10 for their seasons. Yeah, I think Rodri's arguably been more consistent than Haaland, but Haaland's obviously had more of an impact.
I thought it was telling in the first half, well, the whole of the Champions League final, really. I know he scored the goal, but it was arguably Rodri's worst game of the season, and it's telling that when Haaland has a bad day, City can get by. When Rodri has a bad day, the whole thing breaks down. that felt quite telling in the Champions League final that I think he is arguably more important. Rodri playing well is arguably more important to City than Haaland playing well, which maybe edges him as player of the season. Although that sounds harsh on a 52-goal striker.
I also agree. I also think it's hard to deny Haaland these player of the season awards because he's done stuff that no other player ever has done. I think the only thing you'd say about Rodri is there have been very, very good and influential defensive midfielders in the past. I mean, for City as well, just look at Fernandinho, but Haaland has broken these records because no one has ever done it before to the extent that he's done. So I think Haaland would probably edge it, but the Rodri debate leads me on to the second best player of the season award because there have been a lot of standouts. Has anyone got a suggestion for who could rival Haaland and Rodri?
I feel like City had different players who stepped up at different times, and I think a word should be said in favour of Riyad Mahrez, because if Riyad Mahrez doesn't drag City kicking and screaming through January and February, City don't win the treble, probably don't win any trophy, apart from maybe the FA Cup, because Mahrez was scoring left, right and centre in that. When City were really, really struggling and no one was in form, Mahrez and Grealish were the two that stepped up. And Mahrez kind of fell away a bit and lost his place in the team, and Bernardo kind of was so important in those latter Champions League rounds. And then, harsh on Mahrez. You couldn't argue with Bernardo playing the FA Cup final, but it's harsh on a guy that scored a hat-trick in the semi to be left on the bench. Season kind of fizzled out. But had he not been so good at the start of 2023, then City's season wouldn't have been what it was.
Yeah, I mean, to not even get on in either of those games felt pretty harsh on him. I mean, you could probably throw Stones and Diaz into those conversations, but again, like Si kind of hinted at, you're probably looking at recency bias for that because they've been so good recently, really. When over a whole season, I mean, maybe you'd put Grealish as third, just for I think he's been fairly consistent over the whole season, but so that's right that different players have stood up at different times, and in this brilliant run to the treble since maybe early March, Stones and Diaz have been excellent. So that I think they'd definitely be in the top five. But over the whole season, I think maybe I'd have Grealish as third best. I think
I'll throw Nathan Ake out there. I think he steps in at left back. And,
very good shout. Yeah.
Was very, very good. And even though he was out for about a month or so before the finals, he stepped back in and played a Champions League final at left back. And a year ago he was talked about leaving the club, and now he's won the treble, and he solved a problem basically when Cancelo left, and everyone we were here and we were saying who's going to play left back, and everyone was saying what's going to happen, and then suddenly Nathan Ake is one of the best left backs in the league, and no one's saying anything. So I think that debate of the sort of the players underneath Haaland and Rodri it just sums up why City have won this treble, because they've got so many solid performers and consistent performers, and like we've said, different ones have stepped up at different times, but it's a lot of players who, if Haaland hadn't scored 52 goals and if Rodri hadn't been so good and then scored in the Champions League final, they would probably be in consideration for these sort of conversations.
I think
go on.
Edison as well, I think, has had a quietly underrated season. Arguably is best, I would say, certainly in terms of debunking a few myths and shot stopping, obviously vital in the Champions League final. So I think he'd, probably not in the top five, but I think he's another who's had a quietly underrated season. And you're right about Ake. I mean, Ake fits into as well to kind of what Si said. He was carrying that defence and arguably that team at times when City were really struggling in January and early February.
And I'd point to the Arsenal FA Cup game again. Rico Lewis.
John Stones doesn't happen without Rico Lewis.
Well, I was going to ask you young player of the season, so surely that's Rico Lewis, isn't it?
Yeah, Rico. Yeah. I mean, just in terms of like the numbers, like over 1,000 minutes as a a guy who started the season at 17. I mean, we all Foden had been spoken about for so long as this generational talent, and so when he came through, it was kind of unexpected, but also we kind of had been told it was going to happen. Rico's come from nowhere, and yeah, looks like he could be the next John Stones. You stick him anywhere on that pitch. He started off at right back, then left back, then ended up by February he was playing number 8 at Bournemouth, and it was like, what is going on? I've never seen someone take to Guardiola's kind of complex patterns of play so quickly. You look at the first teamers that came in and struggled, and Rico Lewis has just done it without sort of breaking a sweat. It's pretty incredible what he's done this season.
I think that's the benefit of the academy playing exactly the same system, because he's played that role for 10 years, and now he's come in and he just knows exactly what to do. And speaking to the coaches and players in the academy, that they knew he was probably one of those who would have a shout of being in the first team, but even they couldn't have sort of anticipated how quickly he's done it and how effectively he's done it. And I think young player of the year has to be Lewis. And it's refreshing as well. We're talking about players of the season, and we've not talked about Gundogan, who scored all those goals at the end of the season. We've not talked about De Bruyne, who scored against Real Madrid and has had a very good season himself at times. When he's been good, he's been as good as he's ever been. And players like that, so again, underlines just the strength and depth of City squad, although the chairman will insist and have you listen that they do not have a big squad. Any disappointments in the season? Anyone who's you thought would be better than they have been?
I mean, Calvin Phillips is the obvious one, I guess, hasn't he? He's not made any impact, and if he does stay, he's got a big second season. I think he's the obvious one from that. You dread to think, like I said before, about how important Rodri, arguably the most important player in that team. You dread to think what would have happened if he'd missed even a month with some kind of injury. It could have derailed an awful lot in City's season. That. Yeah.
I don't think anyone was expecting Phillips to play as little as he did, and he kind of, he clearly annoyed the coaching staff when he came back from his kind of break after the World Cup. And you spoke about kind of Grealish getting tabloid attention. Grealish got a lot of attention for going to New York at Christmas after the World Cup, more because he was doing the Home Alone tour. But Phillips went as well, and Grealish came back and was one of City's best players, and Phillips came back and was out of the squad because he wasn't fit enough. So that attitude has to be better next year. I think kind of disappointing for Foden, really. When you think back to like September and him scoring a hat-trick against United in the derby, it looked like we were finally gonna see the best of him, and then he kind of lost his place to Grealish and never really won it back. Struggled with injuries, but also just couldn't oust Grealish from that spot, so we didn't really see as much of him as he would have liked.
There was a period, wasn't there, where Foden was looking really good on the right hand side, and there was him and De Bruyne overlapping each other and taking turns in feeding Haaland, and you're thinking this could be a really good way of including him and Grealish in the team, and then it just tailed off. And I have been encouraged by Foden in midfield and in the last few weeks, and I think he's looked more comfortable there. Another name I'd throw as a sort of disappointing season would be Cole Palmer. I thought he'd kick on and get a few more chances, but even when he did play, he looked like he was trying a little bit too hard. So to see him play a little bit better at the end of the season, albeit after the title was won, was another sort of positive. And whatever happens with Palmer, he probably will look at this season and think he could have done a little bit better. Let's think a bit more positive. Any goals of the season? There have been some good ones, haven't there?
Yes, I can tell you the best goal of the season that I didn't see, and that was when a colleague, while Manchester City were at Southampton, asked me to try and plug in his laptop, and when I looked up, Erling Haaland was wheeling away in celebration.
Oh no!
And Yeah, it's quite a good goal, that one, by all accounts. Just not from my account. Yeah.
I mean, the one that has got to stick out for me for quality of the strike, but also just the timing and the moment is Gundogan in the cup final for sheer, like, you know, I was not going to swear on this podcast, but for sheer, like, holy, what has just happened? And like, sorry, I mean, I wasn't even in there. I was in rural France watching that, but it was still one where you were just like, oh my God, what's just happened? You know, it was a great goal as well, but for the sheer sort of drama and narrative and timing of it, it was a total jaw dropper.
Yeah, I don't think until Rodri scored that goal in the final, I don't think City fans will have had a better celebration where they can just jump up and just completely let themselves go, because that was a moment that, to be there, was just ridiculous. I don't think anyone in that stadium believed what had happened.
No,
what just seen.
Rodri against Bayern Munich, anyone? That was a very satisfying one.
Yeah, left footer.
Although I kind of think De Bruyne's against Madrid was a better hit.
Mm-hmm.
Just when you watch that ball go, it's just like, oh my word. And also De Bruyne's against Arsenal, where he kind of almost like sand wedges it past Aaron Ramsdale from 30 yards. It's just like, I think it bends from outside the post to in, and it just looks like so easy, but it's a strike that probably no one in the world other than Kevin De Bruyne and 2 or 3 other people could play.
Yeah, I think De Bruyne scored very good goals in both games against Arsenal, didn't he? The lob and the sort of pass from 25 yards or whatever. Another De Bruyne one that I've just remembered was it Bournemouth at home, where he just drops a shoulder, the defender just goes completely, and he bends it with the outside of his boot into the far corner.
That goal notable.
That's perfect, isn't it?
That, like, 4 Bournemouth defenders all backing away, running away with him because Erling Haaland was forward, and they're all so terrified that he got the ball that De Bruyne just allowed to run kind of half a pitch length.
Yeah, we were right behind that, and just the satisfaction of just seeing that just bend from the outside of the boot.
Yeah.
It feels like there's not been many screamers, but a lot of like really high quality goals.
Yeah. One that, I mean, this isn't a great goal, but it sticks in my memory just for the like, oh, he can do that as well. Was Bernardo's header against Bayern when Haaland, I think Grealish won the ball. It was a good City press. Grealish won the ball, played it into Haaland. You're thinking Haaland's going to shoot, and he just kind of dinked that perfect little cross to the back post for Bernardo to head in. And you know, the way it came about through the pressing, and then Haaland just taking the right option to lay it on a plate, really, but lay it on a plate with a technically perfect cross. You know, it was quite a, it's not one that you'd put on a 10 best goals of the season highlights reel, but for kind of what happened and the way it came about, it was like, that's interesting. He can do that as well, right? Okay, there might be unstoppable here.
Yeah, there was one. I think one of my games of the season was Palace at home, just because they looked absolutely dead and buried at 2-0, and then Haaland starts, and you're like, oh my God, he's single-handedly just winning them games like Sergio Aguero used to do, but more aggressively. And there's a number of these through the season where he just like bounces off players like they're not even there. But again, from our view in the press box, I think it was Gundogan passed him the ball, and he's maybe 30 yards from goal, and he's just holding off Anderson, and he just holds him off and holds him off and holds him off, and we can just see from 30 yards out he's nowhere near goal, but we know it's a goal before he's got close to the box, because he's just so in control of everything he does.
I think the Brighton one where he barges, was it Webster out of the way, and sends him to the corner flag and scores that one. That was another satisfying one. You mentioned their best game of the season. I'd not thought of the Palace one, but that was a moment, wasn't it, where you realise that City can come back and do this, and Haaland is going to be a really big threat.
Yeah, that was good in the league. The 2 Arsenal games in the league were really, really high quality, and kind of showed at what point City were at that stage of the season. And people were kind of expecting for that game at the Etihad, how City will come out and dominate, but no one saw kind of exactly how how dominant they would be. I really enjoyed Real Madrid away and Bayern Munich away. I think they were both games that City would have lost last season or any other season, because the home team on both occasions were phenomenal. But City rose to it and got a creditable draw that helped them through to the final.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many this season. Yeah, I mean, you think most of them, it seems, in this run, but you think back just for sheer, again, what is going on here, the 6-3 against United, which really, it arguably loses points for finishing 6-3. It should never have finished 6-3. They should have won that more comfortably. But for the narrative as well of Foden getting the hat-trick, Haaland getting the hat-trick, both of them, the local lad against United, Haaland
Sergio
against
Gomez
United.
getting an assist.
Yeah. That ticked a lot of boxes. The Tottenham game at home, just for the sheer drama of it all and what happened afterwards is memorable. Liverpool at home when they went behind and just even when they went behind, I know it was a shaky Liverpool at that point, but there's so much sort of narrative to that fixture. And then it's I guess it's hard to look beyond. If you were picking a performance of the season, you can't look beyond Real Madrid really. I mean, that was that 45 minutes, that first half, that first 45 minutes is hang it in the Louvre territory for this team. It's it was their piece de resistance so far, wasn't it, that 45 minutes? So it's hard to look beyond that, I guess.
I was going to mention that Liverpool one because it came in a run of a lot of good results, but yes, Liverpool weren't the side that they have been recently, but that felt like a bit of a statement of we're going to win, and we're going to win by a lot of goals, and they did that to a lot of big teams, didn't they? And I'd also throw out the Arsenal winning the FA Cup. It probably didn't feel like it at the time, but that probably was a lot more significant by showing Arsenal that City can beat them and come on, and I think that was the roots of the comeback in the Premier League. So been a pretty good season overall, hasn't it? So we'll take
not bad.
we'll take one final break, and then we'll come back and discuss next season and the summer. Hello there, welcome to part 3 of the Talking City podcast. We've done and dusted with 2022-23, and now we can look forward to the new season. And we've already got the fixture list for the new season. Yes, City have to play every team twice. Tyrone, has anything come up that might be a banana skin for City at any time?
Well, I was gonna steal my inspiration for this by looking at size 47 tweet thread about the fixtures, but it seems he paused at one and got fed up with the analysis.
Well, you'll notice I came to you in that side for that question.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
I'd rather the only good thing about City fixtures than internationals.
Fair.
Yeah, the only good thing about the fixtures and the fixture release day for us is at least it gives us something to write about in June when nothing else is happening. It's a free hit to kind of dredge up some kind of opinion about it. I mean, when you look at it, the obvious one is easy start, going into a very difficult spell. But again, that's kind of obvious when you have the first run of something like 8 games for City, 8-9 games that are all really, really winnable. It's inevitable then that you are going to go into a difficult spell. But you look at that and it's interesting in a way because City don't always come out the blocks on fire, and obviously it was a bit of a slow burn this season. But if they do start quick, they could easily win their first. What we're looking at. I mean, Burnley, Newcastle, Sheffield United, Fulham, West Ham, Forest, Wolves, 7 games. Really, they should be winning all of them. They could have 21 points after 7 games, and then for the rest of the league, it's playing catch up already. So I think the start is an opportunity, but also maybe something of a risk. If they drop points in a couple of those games, they then go into a much harder run where it could get more difficult and might give the chasing pack some kind of belief or confidence. But then that happened this season with Arsenal and City just burn them off at the end of the season. So difficult to say. But I do think the start they've got is, to have those first 7 fixtures first up, you could ease your way into that season and still win all 7 of them. So it does feel like that's a real opportunity to just send a statement out at the start of the season to say, we're coming again, and almost just sap the belief and the hope of the rest of the league by October.
And I think that'll be key, because once you get into it, I was sort of putting all of the round dates of the Champions League, FA Cup and Carabao Cup. If you give every weekend and weekday a slot, or midweek a slot, then if City get to all of these finals, they'll only have one free midweek all season, because they've got the Club World Cup to play bang in the middle of December, which will throw a crisis in the Carabao Cup, because there won't be enough time to play a quarter final, and there'll be a lot of postponements, especially in the new year. And one potential postponement could be Tottenham away for the FA Cup semi-final, and that would have to be played in the final week. Guardiola's made it fairly clear he doesn't like playing Tottenham away. They've not scored there. Could that be a significant, Si?
Yes and no at the same time. It's I just basically, yeah, your point about the other competitions is what is key. I actually think it might work in City's favour not playing Brentford at home on the 23rd of December, because they normally kind of have one game at home in December where they just think, yeah, we're not turning up today, lads, and that was, well, it was Brentford last year and Fulham, but yeah, it has been in the past. But I think at the minute what's important is that City kind of have that aura back where everyone expects them to win every game. So if they can start well, everyone will be kind of a bit deflated, and if they do not start well, then that will kind of perk everyone up again. But it's how City respond to those Champions League games. It's how they respond to being away. When they're away at the Club World Cup, can anyone take advantage? It'll be those kind of things that kind of sway the momentum of the league. And it's going to be interesting to see how City set up, because, like Guardiola says, you can't be perfect for 12 months, a year. City have previously kind of been better like November to March, but this year it was more late Feb to May, so that obviously helped them for the Champions League. Will they do that again, even though there's no Winter World Cup? Be quite interesting to see how City approach the season with their kind of conditioning.
And what they might have to do is get a little bit of a bigger squad. We've heard a lot about outgoings in the early weeks of the transfer window. We've heard Bernardo repeatedly refuse to decide or say if he's made a decision. Ilkay Gundogan has technically been released as City wait on a new contract for him. Guardiola and Khaldoon have said they want him to stay, but ultimately it is up to him. There was quotes today from Guardiola on João Cancelo, who doesn't seem to be wanted by Bayern Munich, but also doesn't seem to be wanted by City either. So it's going to be a bit of a rebuild, is it, Si?
Yeah, it is. There's going to be significant activity, and we're going to see a few first teamers leave. I don't think it's going to be as big a rebuild as maybe it could be. Basically, I think every club in the world would want to sign Man City players, and every Man City player, after winning the treble, especially if you've not played a massive part of that, is entitled to think, have I achieved everything I can at this club? Will I top that? We're still waiting on Ilkay Gundogan, who's got 10 days left on his contract and is still kind of mulling up where he wants to be. Kyle Walker obviously had talks with Bayern Munich, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he will go there. He could go there, but it is also tempting for him to stay and win more at City. Riyad Mahrez, again, he's in the news for maybe leaving, but will he leave? Maybe not. So yeah, we're at that stage of the summer where kind of a lot of players could leave. I think it's probably going to be similar to last year in 3 or 4 first teamers going. You would expect Bernardo to leave this summer. You would expect Laporte to leave. Gundogan's probably 50-50 at this point. And then, yeah, it could be any one of Walker, Mahrez, Phillips. But it would be a surprise if it was kind of all of them. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting summer, but I still think kind of the core of the squad will be there next season. We're still going to be talking about, you know, five centre backs with Guardiola and the, you know, Rodri and De Bruyne and Haaland and Foden and Grealish. So there's still going to be plenty of familiar faces.
And in terms of incomings, is there anyone, Tyrone, that you can see? You've written that there's been an interest in Declan Rice, although it seems like he might be on his way to Arsenal now.
Yeah, it certainly seems that Arsenal are favourites. I think City are weighing up their options there, whereas Arsenal are making bids. So I think Arsenal have a head start. I mean, the issue for City, I guess, is do they need Declan Rice? I mean, if Bernardo and Gundogan both stay, they probably don't. If Bernardo and Gundogan both go, then that's clearly City's biggest problem this summer in strengthening midfield and finding more midfielders at that point. If they both go, suddenly you think, crikey, we need Declan Rice, and he might be already holding the Arsenal shirt aloft at the Emirates. So that's a tricky one for them. Beyond that, I think midfield is clearly the issue. I could certainly see Mahrez going. I think he's. If I was Mahrez, I'd be very annoyed at the way the season ended. I think, and he's of an age where he might consider Saudi Arabia as being worth a look now. And I mean, the interesting thing with Bernardo, I think we know he wants to go because he's wanted to go for about 3 years now. But it's where does he go? And obviously his dream is Barcelona. I don't see how Barcelona can afford him. PSG are an option. Well, yeah.
Is
there an attraction to go into PSG? I mean, it's absolutely soulless. You win a pointless league title. The weather's not much better than Manchester. And then beyond that, I mean, Bernardo surely is not going to go to Saudi Arabia. I mean, I know he wants to leave Manchester, but come on. That would be an absolute travesty if he took that route. So, it'd be interesting to see whether he just reaches a point where he thinks, I want out and PSG is something different. I'll do that for maybe 2 years and see if he can finally gradually work his way south and get to Barcelona. Maybe go to Marseille after that and just keep inching closer and closer till he ends up in Barcelona. So, midfield is the big issue, I think, and you can see why Rice might be someone they're looking at, because if they lose Bernardo and Gundogan, then he's probably a good replacement, and he's different to Rodri. I think we've seen that Rice can play as a kind of number 8 in a box to.
Is that me frozen or?
I think that was Ty frozen.
I think that was me.
Ah, fair enough.
Yeah, I'm back now. I don't know how much of that you caught, but basically you can see why they'd like Rice, because he's quite good.
Well, on that note, now our connections are failing us, we will leave it there. If you want to find out all the latest news on the City transfer front and everything else, you know where we are, the manchestereveningnews.co.uk. Click on Man City. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on YouTube, and we are also on TikTok. We have 10,000 followers now on TikTok, so give us a follow on there and see what we're up to. I can't say I've seen it myself, but I can add another one if.
Have you not seen Ty dancing on there?
Well, if that's
I thought that was private. Was that not? Oh.
That's why we've got 10,000 followers.
What goes on in those Istanbul nightclubs?
And if that doesn't tempt you to sign up to City on City MEN on TikTok, nothing will. So we'll be back next week to talk about the latest goings on. Thank you for joining us, and follow us on TikTok.